what is medical school actually like? I've been in medical school for 4 years and I'm now heading into my fifth and final year. So I believe I can give an accurate portrayal of what medical school is actually like without this unrealistic picture that social media can often paint. So the first thing I'd say is medical school is going to vary depending on what university you study. So I'm currently attending a medical school in the UK, and depending on the medical school, you're likely to have a different curriculum. That being said, however, there's two parts. There's the preclinical years and the clinical years. So the preclinical years, you're going to spend most of the time in your university, in the medical school, learning physiology, anatomy, pharmacology, all the important sciences that are going to allow you to progress onto clinical medicine. So it's about learning about the body, how the body works, all of its structures, and what can go wrong with the body, and then the pharmacology, how we can use medications to help treat the problems that can occur. So that's that in a nutshell. That was the first 2 years of medical school. Following that, year 3, 4, and 5, the clinical years, you're not going to be in university. You're going to be in a hospital. So when it comes to hospital, you're going to rotate between different hospital placements. So you might stay at a certain hospital for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and then you switch to another one. And whilst you are in a specific hospital, you might be allowed to be in a certain number of wards. You're going to be under a consultant who's going to teach you. You're likely to have some bedside teaching. The hospital itself, especially if it's a teaching hospital, is going to offer you some lectures that you can go and watch. And in my experience, the clinical years are a lot more fun than the preclinical years. The preclinical years, you just in university, just studying and learning it. You don't really feel like a doctor. But once you are in your clinical years, you're going to be interacting with patients, you're going to be interacting with other healthcare workers, you're going to be part of the team, and you're going to see what it's actually like. You're also going to have opportunities to scrub into surgery, and if you're especially keen, you can try and find some doctors in a specialty that you're interested in and try and shadow them. So in a brief summary, that's the content of medical school. So, but what is it actually like? Like, what's the actual structure day to day? In your clinical years, you're in hospital. The timetable says that you're there from 9 to 5. However, there are times that, let's say, on a certain rotation, you might have to go out of hours. This is far less frequent, but it does occur, and I have had times where I've had out of hours clinical experience, clinical placements. And when it comes to the first 2 years, the preclinical years, you're going to be in uni, in the medical school. You're going to have lectures timetabled for you. In my medical school, most of the lectures you didn't have to attend, and most of the lectures were pre-recorded, so you could go through them in your own time. However, we had structured times for tutorials, so we'd go through worksheets relating to what we learned through the lectures, and it'd be group work. So essentially, there was no one really assessing us, but it'd be a group of other medical students alongside yourself, and you'd be working through a worksheet relating to the topic that you learn through the lectures. So in a nutshell, that's what the daily structure was. And of course, outside of the times that you're in hospital or you're in university, you need to study. And studying will take up a lot of time because the exams are not easy because of the amount of content they contain. So, now to the realistic part of medical school, what it's like. I would say a really important skill to acquire if you're going to go into medical school is time management. If you're able to have good time management, then you should be able to do other hobbies alongside medicine, which is really important for your own well being. However, if your time management skills are poor and you don't study consistently throughout the year and instead try and cram, then that's a recipe for disaster because of the amount of content that you have to learn. So, because of that, because of the fact that it's also hard to manage your time because of the pressure of the content that you have to learn, it is quite stressful. It is quite stressful, and there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And the exams are essentially the bulk of the stress because prior to medical school, if you are a person that's going to become a medical student, the thought of even failing an exam likely hasn't crossed your mind because you're probably acing your exams. But in medical school, there's always a certain percentage of the year group which will fail, and that's how the exams are. So there is a constant pressure to essentially not be that person and not wanting to resit the year group or resit exams. So the biggest pressure I think medical students face is the constant need to make sure you're on top of your work because you don't want to fall behind, because you don't want to fail any exams. And because of that, it can be really stressful because it's really easy for the work to pile on really quickly. So I hope that gives a realistic view on what it's like to be a medical student. And if you guys have any questions relating to that, then just drop a comment and I'll try and get back to you.